According to data collected by the Global Initiative on Transnational Organised Crime, there's an increase in the number of assassinations in the country since 2015. Of the political hits recorded across the country between the years 2000 and 2021, 213 took place in the last 7 years. And of that number, 118 were in KwaZulu-Natal. Mary Haas, human rights activist and violence monitor, joins us live now. Mary, thank you so much for your time. And I do understand you are, of course, affected by load shedding. Thank you so much for still joining us. Now, these numbers, when one looks at them, we've seen a lot of concern around some of the killings over the years. Are you surprised that we're seeing these figures?
Don't even bother me with everybody. No. Problem. I mean, totally lawless. And I mean, most of these killings, especially if they're political assassinations or some of the others, like land activists getting killed, are done by hitmen. And we seem to be the kind of, the center for the hitmen that is applied in the country. I mean, there are others too, but, former data by Transnational Organised Crime has said most of them come from this province, which I would agree with.
Mary, I'm not sure if you're still there. If you are, let's talk about then the impact, and the implications of the intersection of politics as well as violence, especially when you look at a province like KwaZulu-Natal.
Look, we're a violent province without, we're a violent country. I mean, I think people forget that we have a history of violence in this country. Kids growing up in the 80s and the 90s were scarred for life with the most appalling stuff they witnessed, and that's never really been addressed. The kind of trauma that children grew up with during the violence in this province in the 80s and 90s just makes it worse. Then there's this culture of violence, the proliferation of guns. So we've got a whole history of it here. So it's part of the whole kind of social fabric of society. There's been training. There's been paramilitary training in this country since after 1994. I mean, this is all on record in my stuff. And nothing's been done about it. So and I think the crux of the matter is that a lot of the centers are on the taxi industry. I mean, the taxi industry, some of the most powerful taxi warlords in the country are based in this province. And the taxi industry is just not regulated properly. And there's a lot of overlap with politics because politicians may have taxi interests. They have business investment. Some of the security industry, especially that guarding the taxis, is not well enough, regulated. There's a lot of guns, huge numbers of guns in this province. So all of the feeds. Most of the hitmen are supplied by the taxi industry. Some by the shady security operators. One person, I remember, said to me, well, they're bodyguards by day, hitmen by night. Now, when you get to the politics, it stands to reason that when you are deploying hitmen for all sorts of purposes, maybe to take out a business associate or an unfaithful husband, you're going to use them for your political measures. That's what's been happening, basically. And what makes it worse, the crux problem is that this is allowed to happen by poor law enforcement. That law enforcement starts with the kind of what I think is the virtual collapse of intelligence services in South Africa. And you could see that from what happened last July, because intelligence services should pick this up. bad training of detectives, the control of political investigations by a minister who cannot be impartial because some of the people who are suspects in political killings are his own colleagues, so it creates a conflict of interest. So it's kind of that sort of thing. I mean, I have personally tackled politicians. You take outside Durban, you've got a large semi-rural area called Ntwetwe. Now, that was being serviced by a regular bus service that was fairly economical for people. The taxis move in, kill the bus driver, the owner, kill the drivers. Now people are paying a lot more for transport. The politicians are doing nothing. One of the taxi companies is not even registered to operate in the area. So this is what happens. I mean, we have in Durban at the moment, Go Durban. You know, this is a new transport system. There's no transparency. I know taxi operators that have died just asking questions because of the political connections. So, of course, the politics drive this, but the politicians are victims if they're in the wrong faction or they try to expose corruption. But they use hitmen most of the time. And those hitmen operate with unregistered SIMs. So how's the police dealing with that?
And, you know, when one really listens at what you've just said, you talk about the access to, illegal firearms, at the same time, the quality of investigations that's been carried out and the politicization of some of these matters. And you say, of course, this is part of what is also making things difficult. And I can't help but, think about KwaZulu-Natal, for example. We saw the Muerana Commission, coming into play to try and investigate as to what exactly was at the heart of what we were seeing there. A report was tabled, recommendations were made, findings were made, but listening to what you're saying, then it sounds like still it's more of the same and the situation hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't changed. I mean, I could have told you that we've had other commissions of inquiry. I mean, I could have told you that. Look, I must tell you, and there's going to be a lot more of this in the news, I think, because there's a crisis in policing in South Africa. There's huge corruption in policing, starting right from some of the management levels right through, getting rid of competent police members, putting in buddies. Now, when the police service is at this state, and as I said to you, there's going to be a lot more publicity about this because one of the whistleblowers in the police, Patricia Mashale from the Free State, is in hiding in fear of her life from her overseas colleagues. Now, until you deal with the policing issues, it starts with intelligence, but as I said, once you get onto the level of management, the structure of policing.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, and apologies for load shedding there. But hopefully we get to have more of this conversation because there's quite a lot that is at play when one looks at this data that has been collected here. But let's leave it there for now. That was Mary Haas, human rights activist and violence monitor.